Thank you for attending the My Horse University and E-Extension Horse Quest live webcast titled Is My Horse Fat? And Estimating Body Weight in Adult Horses. So our presenter for this evening is Dr. Krishona Martinson. Krishona received her bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin River Falls and her master's and PhD from the University of Minnesota. She has worked for the University of Minnesota since 2001 and is currently the Equine Extension Specialist in the Animal Science Department. Her specializations include pasture management, weed control, poisonous plants, and forage utilization, and her research focuses on optimizing equine forage utilization. Please note that you're able to ask questions during the presentation via the text chat to the left side of your screen, and there will also be time at the end of the presentation for additional questions as well. We will be recording the webinar this evening and we'll be uploading it to our website, so if you'd like to come back and review the talk at a later date, you will be able to. And at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Martinson.
Thank you very much, Gwen, and welcome. If everybody could just kind of do a thumbs up or type in the chat that you're able to hear me. Or maybe respond to the question, who's sick of winter? Yay! All right. Yes, I am sick of winter as well. So I always like to start my presentations with, this is what I want you guys to take home, and this is what I hope you'll learn today. I want to talk about the different ways that we can estimate body weight in adult horses, and I'll share some equations that have been developed for other classes of horses as well. I realize that not all of us have adult horses. Some of us also have yearlings and weanlings, and I'll share those equations as well. I'll then spend some time talking about some research that we've done here at the University of Minnesota and how we've improved upon some of the existing equations and how we've put these equations in an app called the Healthy Horse app that really helps using these equations. It makes it easier for horse owners. And finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time about how you can use these equations along with body condition scores and a few other methods to really help determine if your horse is overweight. And the reason we're going to focus on the overweight horse is there's been some pretty alarming estimates that show that the incidence of obesity in the horse population has risen substantially in the last handful of years. Now, I also realize with the shortage of hay and the general economy, we also have horses on the flip side, horses that are very thin, that are in rescue situations. And I think we can use this with those animals as well, but we're really going to focus on that overweight horse. So knowing what your horse weighs is really important for many, many things. And I think the two things that come to mind right away is really nutrition. When we feed an animal, we feed based on their body weight. So it's important that we know what they weigh. Also, when we're giving horses medications, and especially dewormers, it's really important to know what they weigh because a lot of those are also based on body weight. Now, it would be wonderful if we could all weigh our horses, but in reality, very few horse owners will ever have their horse weighed on a scale. Usually, if you bring your horse to a larger vet clinic, they will weigh it on a scale. But if you're with a smaller vet clinic or your veterinarian comes to your house with an ambulatory service, it's unlikely they're going to have a scale with them. But fortunately, there are some ways that we can establish methods for determining a horse's weight. And the two that probably come to mind that are most common are weight tapes and equations. And Gwen, is this a good place to put up our poll? So Gwen has put up a poll here. So if you guys could just click on it. Have you used any of these below methods to estimate your horse's body weight? Have you used a weight tape? And you can just click on it. Have you used some of the equations? Have you used a scale? Have you simply guessed? Or you don't have to vote as well. So we'll give a couple minutes for you guys to vote, and you can vote multiple times if you've had your horse, if you've used multiple methods. So it looks like many of you have used weight tapes or have gone with the good old method of guessing, which can be dangerous. I have found through doing research that I am not good at all at guessing horse weight. So I appreciate you using this poll, and hopefully when we show you the equations, it will be really helpful in getting a more accurate estimation of your horse's body weight. Thank you very much, Gwen. So weight tapes that the vast majority of you have used. How weight tapes work, and there are many, many, many different kinds, is you will usually go around the girth of the horse. And as you can see in the picture here on the right-hand side, you can see this person is actually using a tape measure, but the idea is the same for a weight tape. You usually go at the highest point of the withers or at the base of the mane hairs. You go around the horse's girth, and where the numbers line up, that is the estimate of what your horse weighs. And again, there are many, many different types of weight tapes. A lot of nutrition feed companies offer them, or you can buy them at any kind of farm supply store. So again, this is better than guessing. Now, what is far more accurate are these equations that have been developed for use with different classes of horses. And I'll leave this up for a while and talk about these, but essentially they're all very similar. So different researchers have developed equations based on the horse's body length, and I have a picture of how to accurately measure body length in the next slide, and also that girth circumference. So for adult horses, you measure that girth circumference at the base of the mane hairs in inches. You square that, you times it by the body length, and you divide by 330. So for all horses, it is girth squared times body length divided by a specific number. And for adult horses, it's 330. Now, when I say adult horses, I'm assuming, or what the equation assumes, is that the horse is at least 58 inches tall. So now we're going to switch to a pony. Again, it's the same equation, girth squared times body length divided by 299. And I realize if any of you are in any kind of a pony show circuit, I realize you may have different cutoffs, but for the purpose of this equation, we're going to say any equine that is less than 58 inches is considered a pony. Now, just a couple of years ago, a group out of Auburn University, they actually developed an equation for a mini, and that's a pretty good idea. Now, they used a mini as being an equine that is less than or equal to 34 inches. Now, I know people that have minis and show them, there are different cutoffs, but for the purpose of this equation, we're using just that very generic 34 inches and below as a cutoff. So again, for a mini, it's that girth squared in inches times the body length divided by 307, and that gives you the mini's estimated body weight. There were then researchers out of Texas A&M, and they looked at doing this for yearling and weanling horses. Obviously, a yearling is a horse between 1 and 2 years of age. A weanling is a horse usually between 4 months and 1 year. And you can see that they took girth squared times the body length, and for a yearling, that was divided by 301. And for a weanling, it was divided by 280. So I hope you I hope you can jot these down. This webinar is being recorded. Go back and refer to these. Many researchers have looked at these equations and have determined that they are more accurate in estimating a horse's body weight compared to using a weight tape. However, one thing is very important. You need to measure the horse in the right way. So for these equations, the heart girth or the girth circumference is again usually at the base of the mane hairs. You wrap it around the horse's girth like this picture shows. That measurement is usually pretty easy for people to wrap their heads around. The body length one can be a little bit more challenging. To do body length, you want to go from the point of the shoulder. That's usually pretty simple to find. Even on a chubby horse, you'll be able to find the point of the shoulder. If you kind of palpate the shoulder, you'll feel the little point. and you wrap the length around to the midpoint of the buttocks. So as you can see on the drawing on the right, you actually wrap the tape measure around to the midpoint of the buttocks. Now this is distinctly different than how you measure for a blanket. And I'll hear people say all the time, my horse has a blanket size of 50 or of 77, so its body length must be 77. No, that's how you measure for a blanket. When you're measuring body length to estimate body weight, it's point of the shoulder to the midpoint of the buttock. So it's really important to use that measurement and not to use the measurement that you would use to buy your horse a blanket. So if you guys have any questions about these, write them in or type them in the chat. I can address the questions now or at the very end. If I see one that now, that I'll answer it. So Lisa has a question. So it doesn't go around the front of the horse. No, you do not go to the middle of the chest like you would for a blanket. It goes from the point of the shoulder. So I don't know if, I do have a pointer. Yay! So this is, if you can imagine the horse's shoulder kind of slopes right along this line, there's a point. So right there is the point of the shoulder. And like Chris Skelly has just mentioned, you can palpate the point of the shoulder pretty easily. You can feel it. So you do not wrap it around to the middle of the chest. It goes to the point of the shoulder. And again, it goes also the midpoint of the buttock, which you can see right here. All right, so let's practice. So here are some of the horses that we measured in the research study that I will talk to you about. Here we have Biscuit. Biscuit is an 8-year-old black mare. She has a body condition score of 6. Her height is 59 inches. Her girth circumference is 75, and her body length is 62.5. So if you guys just take a second, pick one of the equations, and see what you get for estimated body weight. So hopefully you have a calculator or your phone handy and you can crank this out. So when you guys get an answer, if you could write it in the chat, that would be wonderful. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to try this. All right, well, I think some of you are typing and figuring it out, and Lisa has written an answer down. So her weight is 1,065. So Lisa and Stephanie, you guys have it right. So again, we're going to use the adult horse equation because this horse is over 58 inches. She's 59 inches tall. Now, when we measured her on the scale, she was 1128. That's not bad. It's really not bad. That's pretty close. We usually will say that the equations will be within about 10% of the scale weight. Now, I always like to just kind of also throw out there, her height is 59 inches, so her height in hands is 14.3. I think it's always important to also do the conversion in your head between inches and hands because sometimes that can throw people. So if you have questions about how to do the conversion between height and hands, type it in your chat and we can address that as well. So here's another one, Chaos. And let me tell you, Chaos was appropriately named. Chaos is a weanling, paint with a body condition score of 4. His height was 48 inches. His girth circumference was 49.5, and his body length was 44. And as you guys are calculating away, Beth, I will show you how to do the conversion. All right, so Stephanie, 385 exactly. So in this case, it does not matter how tall Chaos is. Because Chaos is a weanling, we're going to use that weanling equation where we take the girth squared times the body length divided by 280. And again, the scale weight was 417. So the height in hands, this one is an easy one. You take 48 and divide it by 12. 1 hand equals 4 inches. So you can see here that a height of 48 inches equals 12 hands. Then I have one more example that doesn't land right on an even number, and then I can show you how to do the decimal points. Okay, in our last example, Cola is a 7-year-old mare with a body condition score of 5. Her height is 55 inches, girth circumference is 68 inches, and the body length is 55 and a half. So what is Cola's body weight? All right, Laura has it, 858. Again, Cola would be a pony because her height is below 55 inches, or is below 55 inches, or 58 inches, excuse me. Her height is 55 inches. So her scale weight was 882. Again, pretty close, not bad. So her height in hands is 13.3. So what we would do is we would take that 55 and divide it by 4, and we get 13.75. Now, there is no such thing as a 0.75 hands. Remember, 1 hand equals 4 inches. So it's actually 0.75% of that 4 inches, or in this case, it would be 3. So this horse would be 13.3 hands tall. And if you have any more questions on how to do that conversion when it's not a whole number, I'm more than happy to give you a few more examples or walk through that. Or I'm sure even some of the other people on the webinar could maybe offer some hints on how they convert that as well. So when we use these equations and when we are working with horse owners, a lot of times we would look at a horse's body condition score, and we would look at the horse and we would say, you know what, we think your horse is overweight. And the owners would look at us and they would say, well, what should my horse weigh? And you know, our research team thought that's a really good question. What should a horse weigh? With humans, we have the dreaded body mass index where we're never tall enough to have an ideal body mass index. But in horses, we really don't have a good way to say what they should weigh. And this is important because if your horse is over or underweight, you don't feed according to their current weight, you feed at what you want them to weigh. And as the incidence of obesity and other disorders become more prevalent, having a better idea of what your horse should weigh became an important thing that we started to think about. So we set out to do 3 things. We set out to determine, to develop an equation for estimation of ideal body weight based on measurements that were not affected by fat or adipose deposits. While we were doing that, we thought, you know what, let's see if we can improve upon these equations that we just talked about. And finally, kind of like when you take a child to their well child check and they track their growth on a percentage basis, we thought, you know what, let's see if we can develop a percentile method for assessing whether a horse is under or overweight. And we really wanted to provide resources for horse owners to identify if their horse was particularly overweight, but it can also be used for that underweight animal. So in September, a couple years ago, we measured 629 horses at our state 4-H horse show, and then we also have something called the Western Saddle Club Association Champ Show. Both shows are non-breed specific, had a lot of individual horses, and our criteria was the horse had to be at least 3 years of age or older. Now we obviously weighed younger horses, we just didn't include them in our data set. We needed their height to be at least 44 inches, In all honesty, we just had 3 horses that were less than that. And then if they were mares, they could not be in foal. So those were our 3 criteria for the horses to be included in our data set. For all horses, the following was determined by an individual or a team, and it was the same individual or the same team throughout. Body condition score on a scale of 1 to 9. That is the standard Henneke scale that's used. Excuse me. We did height at the 3rd thoracic vertebrae, which essentially you could consider that as where the last of the mane hairs are located. Neck circumference located halfway between the poll and the withers. Girth circumference at the base of the mane hairs. And then body length. And I'll show you a picture of how we kind of altered the body length. So all the measurements you can see here, we have the neck circumference, and that ended up being really important because as horses gain or lose weight, a lot of times that fat is deposited or taken away from their neck. Obviously the girth is really important as well because as a horse gains or loses weight, they tend to put fat around their girth. The height, instead of having those generic cutoffs for pony and horse and mini, we thought about including exact height. And then body length. Body length was really confusing to a lot of people, and so we thought to make it a little bit more simple. Here you can see again we went from the point of the shoulder, but this time we went from the point of the buttock to a line perpendicular. So we did not wrap the tape measure around. And the reason that we didn't do this is because as a horse gets bigger or smaller, that fat deposits on their rear end can change. So we felt that this was a more accurate method. Now in hindsight, I wish we would have taken both of the measurements, but we didn't. It was a fault of ours. But again, in this data set, body length is point of shoulder to a point perpendicular to the buttocks. Again, no wrapping of the tape measure whatsoever with this method. And then of course we weighed all of the horses on a portable livestock scale. Then we just used statistics to develop equations. So I think, Gwen, we have a poll that we can put up here. You guys can see the breeds that we have, and then the colors. It became very apparent that the horses grouped into different breed types when we were estimating when we were doing our equation. So how many of you own stock type horses? Stock types would be like your quarter horses and paints, Appaloosas. How about Arabians, ponies? Saddle type horses would be a Morgan, Tennessee Walker, draft horses, or other. And it looks kind of like what our data looks like. A majority of our horses were stock type horses. And I think that's pretty true throughout most of the U.S., where a vast majority of horses would be in that stock type category. So as you can see, what we ended up with was 493 stock horses. And it was important to look at the horses with a body condition score of 5 because we considered them to be ideal. And of course, these are the horses that we're going to use to develop our ideal weight equations. The Arabians were distinctly different. They were really in a class of themselves. We had 53 ponies, and unfortunately, we only had 21 saddle horses. And you can see we had 6 Morgans, a couple saddlebreds, a couple Mustangs, some Pintos, and then some breeds with just 1 horse. We just weren't comfortable developing equations with only 21 horses. So we didn't proceed further with equations for the saddle type horses. So we continued with equations for stock type, Arabians, and ponies. Now, we hope to someday go to some shows and collect data on saddle type horses, but we just didn't have them in our original data set. So here's the new body weight equation that we came up with. We had body weight, and this is in kilograms, so your measurements would be in centimeters. Sorry about that. You would take your girth times your length times your height times your neck circumference, and then you would divide it by these numbers for Arabians, ponies, and stock horses. And if you use this new equation, you can absolutely get within just a handful of pounds of your horse. Now, I realize this is a very difficult equation to memorize. That is why we've developed an app that I'll talk about in a second to make this more useful. Being an extension, one of the things that we're charged with is bringing useful information to horse owners. And I understand this equation is more complex, but it's also more accurate. So hopefully the combination of the app and, or you could simply put it into an Excel spreadsheet, will help make it useful to all horse owners. Now, I think the one that is really useful and very easy to use is ideal weight. Now, out of those measurements, the length and the height of the horse, the way we measured length, should not change regardless of how fat or thin a horse becomes. Obviously, their neck or their girth circumference is going to change depending on how much weight that horse puts on or takes off. So ideal body weight in kilos, again, I apologize, it's not in pounds. You take the length in centimeters times 2.8 plus the height in centimeters times 4.2, and then you subtract 611 for an Arabian, 577 for a stock horse, and 606 for a pony. And the reason that we don't use girth and neck is because that is affected by adiposity or by how a horse deposits fat. Adiposity is just another word for fat deposits. So again, this is a new equation that will give you your horse's ideal body weight. And again, what we did is we took those horses with a body condition score of 5, which is considered, moderate or ideal on the Henneke system. And we said, okay, this is the data that we're going to use. These horses with these lengths and these heights, this is the way they are. Therefore, if you are if you are a particular length and height and a particular breed type like Arabian stock or pony, this is what you should weigh. And so far, people have been really happy with this. So the next thing we did is we used some pretty sophisticated statistics, and we came up with some percentiles. And we found that if horses are between the 83rd and 48th percentile, which you can see here on with the yellow and green line, that means that those horses are within a healthy weight. So think of this as kind of being a body mass index, essentially, for horses. So for example, if you have a horse that's in the 90th percentile, its body weight score is greater than 90% of the individuals with the same measurements within the same breed type. So that horse, it's very likely that that horse is overweight. Now, if the horse is in the 20th percentile, it's very likely that that horse is underweight. So again, this is just a way to help people further understand if their horse is over or underweight. Now, I realize this seems very complicated. However, we have an app called Healthy Horse. It is currently available for Apple products. The Android version is simply waiting approval. So here you can select Arabian, Mini, Pony, Saddle, or Stock. Now, if you select miniature horses, you will get that original equation that we talked about, girth squared times body length divided by 307. If you select saddle, you'll get that original equation you used, girth squared times body length divided by 330. Again, unfortunately, we did not have those animals in our original data set. If you select Arabian, Pony, or Stock, you will get our new equations. So, and Chris Skelly says she's using it right now. How sweet. So this is what the second screen looks like. Here you can see the same drawing that I showed you previously, and any of these little eye information icons, if you click on them, it reminds you how to measure for the various measurements. So here we have a horse whose height was 63, the girth 74, the body length 68, and the neck circumference 34. You can then press calculate, and you will get, for stock horses, ponies, and Arabians, you will get the estimated body weight. You will then get the estimated ideal body weight, so what the horse should weigh, and then the body weight score. So here we have a horse, its estimated body weight is 1,204 pounds, but it should weigh closer to 1,300 pounds, 1,276. So that horse's body weight scores in the 25th percentile. So it's highly likely that that horse is a little underweight. And so because of that, we encourage that person to contact a professional, an equine specialist, a nutritionist, a veterinarian, and say, hey, can you come out? You know, I have this app. It says my horse is underweight. I just want to make sure that everything is good. Now, if the horse would be between the 48th and 83rd percentile, highly likely it's at an ideal or healthy body weight. And Lisa said she also downloaded it yesterday, and they went out and measured, and she enjoyed it. So again, I realize the new equations are more complicated. However, they're really accurate. And so I encourage you to either go back and copy down the equations and put them into an Excel spreadsheet, or you can purchase the body condition scoring app. In full disclosure, the app does cost $1.99, and any income we receive from the app just goes into a research fund. Obviously, we are missing some major breed types. Our biggest complaint is that we don't have the equations for minis and saddle type horses, and also that we're missing drafts and warm bloods. We are well aware of that, and we currently have grants in to collect data with draft horses and warm bloods as a starting point. Draft horses have never ever had any kind of a weight estimation equation, and especially now that we're including neck circumference, if we try to use our equations with draft horses, it throws everything out of whack because they're built so differently. Breed type really plays an important role in estimating body weight because all horses within a breed are really built differently. They carry weight differently, and it really impacts the findings. So what we were able to do with our research was to develop a more accurate equation to estimate equine body weight. We developed the new ideal body weight equation and the body weight scores, and we are really hopeful that owners and professionals will use these equations along with body condition score to better manage horse body weight, design diets, and to establish healthy body weight goals for their animals. So as we transition into determining if your horse is overweight, we'll just spend about 10 minutes at that. Do any of you have any questions on the body weight estimation equations or the app or anything that we previously talked about? Sure, Lisa has a question. Can you review where you measure the neck? Lisa, you measure halfway between the pole and the withers. So if you run a tape measure along the top of their mane from the pole to the withers, most horses will be between adult, like big horse, horses, not ponies, will somewhere between 35 and 40. So if it's 40 inches from the pole to the withers, you just kind of put your finger at 20 inches, and then you'd measure at that midpoint, and then you just measure around the neck. Great question. All right, so transitioning into the overweight horse. Unlike humans, there's no universally agreed upon definition for equine obesity. In humans, it's a medical condition which is really determined by body mass index. And you can just see a little diagram here in the lower right about the body mass index. And usually people are considered obese when their body mass index is greater than 30. And you can see the calculation here for body mass index. There's many also online calculators that humans can use to determine their body mass index. And like I said, unfortunately, I'm just never tall enough to get a good body mass index. So what a lot of people do is they use the Henneke body condition scoring system, which is seen here, to kind of help them gauge equine obesity. Now, that's a great place to start, but it's not really how the body condition scoring system was developed. So here you can see we have a 1 to 9 scale, with 1 being poor. So obviously this horse in the upper right has a very poor body condition score. We then progress down to moderate and moderate fleshy. This horse right here is probably in that moderate fleshy category. And then finally we have a horse like pictured down here in the lower right that would be in the fat or extremely fat category. The thing about body condition scoring is you look at 6 different areas of the horse. You look at their neck, you look at their shoulder, you look over their tail head, and trying to think of the other places that you look. So again, along the neck, right here at the withers, the back and the tail head, the ribs is a big one, and then of course behind the shoulder. So those are the areas that you look to assess body condition score. So there isn't a lot of agreement, but most experts will say that a horse with a body condition score of greater than 7 is considered overweight. The obesity issue is difficult, but usually if a horse has a body condition score over 7, it is considered overweight. So why are we so concerned? And I think this research really helps point out. So here are different researchers that have looked at different numbers of horses. So here Samantha Brooks looked at 1,200 horses. Here was 331, 300, and here are 629. If we draw a line at 7, body condition score of 7, you can see on average, researchers agree that about 25% of horses are considered overweight. Now Thatcher is a bigger percentage. Interestingly enough, they looked at horses that were in the middle of the summer on rich pasture in Virginia. Our horses were at shows. Harker's horses were at shows in the United Kingdom. And Brooks had a really large number of horses that were kind of throughout her area around Cornell. So some people say that Thatcher may be more accurate because these horses were out on pasture and eating. But regardless, the number of overweight horses is really alarming. So other than body condition score, what are some things that we can use? So Becky Carter, who is a great researcher, she did some research to look at the girth to height ratio. So kind of going along that body mass index for humans, it's a height and a weight issue. So this is a girth to height ratio. And what she found is that a horse would be considered overweight if their girth to height ratio was 1.6 or greater. And they would be considered obese if the girth to height ratio was greater than 1.29. A pony would be considered overweight if their girth to height ratio was 1.33, and obese if it was 1.38 or greater. So these are some values that you can use. Go out and measure your animal's girth. So again, go at the lowest point of the last mane hairs, measure around the girth, measure their height, and then just do that simple ratio. And if you're between that 1.26 or 1.29 for an adult horse, it might give you a little bit more incentive to maybe work on weight loss with your animal. If you're below that, you're probably good. And if you have a pony, you can see it's a little bit higher. So again, this is just a diagram. You can see here that we're at the base of the mane hairs going around the horse's girth. And then the height, they do have fancy height sticks that you can purchase, or you can just use a flat edge like we're using in this picture here, and then you would use the tape measure from the ground to the height at the withers. And then again, it's that ratio. The other thing that Becky Carter did is she looked at a subjective scoring system for the neck region. Again, horses carry a lot of fat in their neck when they become overweight. It's just like a human. They can predict heart disease by actually measuring a human's, especially in men, by measuring their neck circumference. The same thing is true in horses. The bigger their neck, the more prone they are to metabolic dysfunction, things like equine metabolic syndrome. So she developed this Crusty neck scoring system that ranged from 0 to 5, and I have some pictures on the next slide. So 0 indicates no visible appearance of a crest, where 5 signifies a crest so large that it actually flops from side to side. And they determined that any score of a 3, 4, or 5 would be considered a crusty neck, and that horse would be considered overweight or obese. So here are the pictures, and I apologize it's not a better graphic, but here you can see there is no crest. This is a score of 0. Here we have a 1 and a 2, and there's a little bit of a crest starting. Again, these are all healthy and acceptable. Here's a 3. You can start to see the crest is really starting really big on the 4, and the 5 it's actually floppy, and you can eat, and the animal can actually have their neck kind of flop from side to side. So again, this is another way that we can assess whether a horse is overweight. So we can use our ideal weight equations. We can use the body condition scoring of greater than 7, those girth to height ratios for horses and ponies, and the crusty neck. These 4 things together, if your horse is obese according to all these categories, you should probably do something, because you don't want to have metabolic problems down the road. So, Gwen, I think we can put up the poll about, do you think your horse is overweight, or the body condition score of your horses? Look at that. Gwen is so good. So now that we've talked a little bit about this, what do you think the average body condition score of the horses you own is? And again, I can't see how you vote, so don't be afraid or embarrassed. I mean, I have one horse who I have a heck of a time keeping weight off. She's just a real easy keeper. And on the flip side, I still have my very first horse. She's 32 years old, and I have a heck of a time keeping weight on her because of her age. So it looks like most of you have horses in that ideal or that acceptable range of 4 to 6. And Judy has a question regarding the crusty neck score. How would the draft horses be reflected in this, like the Norwegian fjord? Judy, that's a really great question. And you do have to consider a horse's, morphology or just, their build into this. So I think a lot of draft horses, upon first look would maybe appear to have a crusty neck score of 3 or 4. But what I want you to do is I want you to feel that. Is that neck, is it firm? Is it part of their conformation, or is it squishy and fat? I think you would be able to assess, the difference between a nice firm neck and a soft, squishy, fat neck. I think what you also need to do with draft horses specifically is look at the other categories. Look at their body condition. We don't have an ideal weight or a weight estimation equation, but we're really working hard to get funding in that for draft horses. Look at their height to girth ratio. Look at the other components to see if you're also getting the same results that the horse may be overweight. And finally, don't be afraid to talk to a nutritionist. A lot of your equine extension specialist, if you have a county extension specialist who is keen on horses, your veterinarian should be able to help you assess that, or a feed nutritionist. They do a lot of work. They see a lot of horses. So it is much more difficult with the draft breeds in the Norwegian fjords, for example, but I think there's other ways that you can go around that. So I want to make sure we have a couple of minutes left for questions. So in conclusion, how do we estimate body weight in adult horses? We can use the weight tapes. They are better than guessing. But even better than weight tapes are using the equations. And we can use the old equations because they're very simple to use. Remember, it's girth squared times body length and then divided by a specific number. For example, 330 for the adult horse or 299 for the ponies. If you are going to use the old equations, you're going to want to go from the point of the shoulder and then wrap that tape measure around to the point, halfway point of the buttock. Our new equations that are included in the app, and that what I showed you on the screen, they take into account the girth, the actual height, the neck circumference and the body length, and also breed type. And when you measure the body length, point of the shoulder to the point of the buttock, a line perpendicular down, no wrapping of the tape measure. We talked a little bit about new technology. You can use the app or you can put the equations into an Excel spreadsheet. The ideal weight one you can probably do just with your calculator. That one's pretty easy. And then finally, in addition, we want to learn how to determine if your horse is overweight. We can look at body condition score on that scale of 1 to 9. If your horse is, over a 7, you're going to want to start to be more specific about their nutrition or their exercise. Look at that girth to height ratio, and finally look at that Crusty neck score. And if you have a Crusty neck score that's 3, 4, 5, that's another indication that your horse is likely overweight. And Chris has put in a really nice learning lesson from eXtension on body condition scoring that will really be helpful. So with that, I would like to take any questions, and I see that Lisa has a question here. I had a nutritionist that I thought I understood her recommending that horses be on hay on demand. She indicated that horses will self-regulate. Is that proven to be true? Well, Lisa, I think the only time that I would want a horse to have unlimited access to hay, and now assuming this is a healthy horse with no issues, is during really, really cold weather. And we've had a lot of that this winter. If a horse is healthy and the weather is pleasant, we really don't recommend feeding over 2.5% of that horse's body weight. So if you have an average 1,000-pound horse and you're feeding a strictly hay diet, that would be about 20 to 25 pounds of hay a day. I don't think horses are able to self-regulate. I think some horses will do just fine, and some horses will become very obese very quickly on an unrestricted diet. Again, the exception being when it's very, very cold, they need additional hay and almost an unlimited hay diet simply to help them keep warm and to make up the energy demands of cold weather. So I hope that helps Lisa in that regard. So Gwen, I think we have a few more minutes for questions. So you guys can go ahead and type away. So Lisa, so using a large round bale feeder wouldn't be recommended. No, not at all. That's not what I meant to say. A lot of people use large round bale feeders, but I do think you really need to watch your horse's body condition score when they have unlimited access to hay or to pasture. If you see that the horse is, if the horses are gaining weight, what you might want to do is simply, limit the amount of time they spend on the round bale. Maybe you would take panels and close off the round bales for a few hours a day. There are certain feeders that slow the horses down. We've done quite a bit of research on different round bale feeders here at the University of Minnesota. If you would just Google round bale feeder use in University of Minnesota, you'll come up with a fact sheet. There are different slow feed hay nets that will help slow a horse's consumption. So I think round bale feeders are wonderful. They are very useful, but you do have to watch a horse's body weight when they have unlimited amounts of feed. So Chris has a question on the app. What category would work best for warm bloods and thoroughbreds? Thoroughbreds actually fit very nicely into the stock horse category. For the warm bloods, we just don't have we don't have a good equation for them, Chris. We're hoping to collect that data this fall. Because warm bloods have such different body types, they're kind of like, kind of in that draft horse category where they've never really had anything. I think for a warm blood, you could use the old adult horse equation of girth squared times body length divided by 330. So in the app, that would be the saddle type horse for now. And again, we're hoping to update that as we go on. So Pam says she uses a hay net feeder with her round bales and she loves it. Stephanie, thank you very much. Annalise, could you please repeat where I could buy the Healthy Horse app? Annalise, right now it's available in the Apple App Store. So if you go into the App Store of Apple and type in Healthy Horse, it will pop up. And our Android version should be up any day now. We're just in the final days of having that reviewed by the company. And Judy, the Healthy Horse app, again, you can just go into the Apple App Store on your iPhone or iPad and type in Healthy Horse and it will pop up. And Chris Skelly, she is right on it. Look at, she's got the web link for the information on round bill feeders right there. Thank you very much, Chris. And information on the app through iTunes. Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. I should also say that the group that Chris and I work with through e-extension, we are also developing an app to help people better body condition score your horse, and that should be available within about 30 days, and we'll try to keep you updated, I'm sure, through My Horse University and e-extension on when that app is available as well. Well, Gwen, I don't think we have any more questions. Thank you guys. You guys were such a great audience. You had so many wonderful questions, and I just really appreciate you taking time out of your day and joining us. Thank you very much.
And Krishona, we'd definitely like to thank you for being our presenter tonight. I think everyone's giving us some great comments in here. This was a fantastic presentation that you gave us tonight. And just as Krishona said, all the participation from everyone has made it even better, so we really appreciate that. We will be sending everyone a survey through email. Most likely get that out tomorrow. And if everyone could just take a few minutes to give us some feedback on this webcast, it would just help us as we continue to offer these webcasts and to continue to make them even better. Also, I'd like to give you a little bit of information on our March 2014 webcast. We don't have this up on our website yet, but we will most likely get that up there tomorrow. But the title of the webcast is going to be Reducing the Risk of Laminitis. It's going to be on Tuesday, March 25th at 7 p.m. at our typical time. And our presenters are going to be Dr. Paul Siciliano from North Carolina State University and Dr. Shannon Pratt-Phillips, also from North Carolina State University. And this webinar is funded by the U.S. Equestrian Trust. So we'll have that information out shortly. We'll be sending out an email blast regarding it, and it will also be in our eTips newsletter from My Horse University and e-extension. And so with that, we just have some information up here on the slide here about My Horse University and also the URL for e-extension horses. Both websites have a lot of great information on everything from health and nutrition and all sorts of anything and everything you'd be interested about in terms of horses. So please check it out, and you can find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and see lots of videos on YouTube as well. So once again, we'd like to thank everyone, and just remember that this is being recorded. If there's anything you missed or you want to come back to any of the equations or anything, we'll have the link to the recording up on our website tomorrow. And so with that, just like to thank everyone one last time, and we hope you all have a great evening.